Today is the first of a series of 3. Dan, what I really want to do is break the first myth about Winback. Many of you will undoubtedly have this concern. Well, if they're gone, they're probably not going to exactly welcome us back. Tell me, what's the truth about this?
Well, the thing is that, a lot of people think that when a customer's gone, they're gone forever. And really, nothing could be farther from the truth. We've got, past customers, they will come back if they're approached well. On average, about 26% of them will come back. That's what the customer win-back benchmark study found. And there's another study in the Harvard Business Review that involved 40,000 lost customers, and 31% of those came back. So people do come back. It's all a matter of the approach. But first you're probably thinking, well, why would they come back? And the reason they come back is usually tied to the reason they left, right? So sometimes people leave because they want to try something new. Sometimes they just think the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. Other times, maybe they're lured away by a competitor, or there's a change in leadership, and the new leaders bring in their preferred vendor. Of course, customers also leave, because they're unhappy. Maybe it was a customer service issue or a problem with the product, or maybe they just felt like ignored or unappreciated. What's really interesting is that it doesn't matter why people leave. A lot of them will come back. You just need to use the right approach. For customers who left on good terms, sometimes they'll find out they're actually better off with you. They shouldn't have switched, and they're more than ready to return. But often they're reticent to come back on their own, because they disconnected. And so you need to reach out and make them feel welcome again. And many more of your customers who left on good terms will come back if you give them a strong reason for coming back. Maybe you're offering something new or something improved, something like that.
How do you find that information out, though? Because, to do that, it sounds like you've got to do a fair chunk of work. And let's face it, the CRM isn't exactly packed with quality data very often.
No, you've got to reach out. You've got to actually talk to your lost customers. You've got to engage with them directly. Talking to. I'm sorry. Well, it can be scary for sure. Customers that left on bad terms. You've got to reach out to them, with caring and empathy. You've got to ask about their experience. Take responsibility for any problems and try to fix those problems. What's really interesting is that even though that's not anywhere close to the majority of the people who've had bad experiences, this type of outreach it's really powerful. I've seen it turn unhappy customers into returning customers and even advocates, because there's a lot of human psychology at play when you listen to people and you try to fix a problem. Peak end rule and pratfall effect. And in the Q&A, if people want to learn more about that, we can talk about that. But the whole thing is that your unhappiest customers, they can give you the biggest gifts. Like your biggest learnings come from your unhappiest customers. They'll show you where the blind spots are, because a lot of people, they don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to tell you the truth about what's going on. And so you can learn a lot from them.
There's a really interesting anecdote. There's a lady called Amy Brown, who runs a company called Authentics, and they listen to 10 billion calls a year in the US health insurance market. So they hear the good stories and the bad stories. Now, one of the findings that they find across the board is that 24% of sales agents' time is taken up dealing with inbound inquiries from people who couldn't navigate the website but were ready to buy without any additional cost. Now, that nugget of information is golden. And for a couple of $1,000s, they tweak the buyer's journey and a bit of copy. And all of a sudden you've released 24% of your entire sales operation. That's bizarre, isn't it?
It's amazing. We've got blind spots that we're totally unaware of. And by simply talking to customers or lost customers, you can learn so much. You can learn so much about increasing retention and new product development for new products, adjacent markets. We can talk about all that stuff later. But you know, the big thing is like, what's the payoff for Winback, right? So we said a lot of them will come back, but how does that translate into dollar terms? And my study, the customer Winback benchmark study, we found that the average customer Winback campaign generates 485K, and large organizations, they generate millions. And just to give you maybe a little more context, a one-person consultancy, they generated 70K with their Winback. A small agency did 700K, and a financial services company, they did 68 million. So there's a lot of money involved here. There's a lot of money available.
Dan, you had your own business, and that's how you got into Winback. Talk to us about the actual practical experience of that first step, because we'll get into the payback in a minute. But let's talk about the grim reality of it. How did you even get off the starting block?
Well, I had a company. We had 50,000 customers. Not at the same time, but we had generated 50,000. And in 2016, our retention started to go way high. And it was really, really digging into our profits. It was actually getting kind of scary because we didn't understand what was going on.
You mean your churn was going up?
Our churn was going up. Yep. And, we had always, we always reached out to our current customers, and, we didn't really see any big deal anyway. So what happened was I was tasked with fixing the problem. I was one of 3 founders, and this was my job to fix this problem. So what I did is I just threw everything I knew about marketing at this problem, and I created a Winback program. And there was hardly anything out there at the time about Winback. And so anyway, I wasn't optimistic about it because we'd already reached out to our people, just said, if somebody left, we sent out an email, most of the time anyway. Anyway, so we launched the program, and it was this massive success. I mean, it was shocking. We had a 57x ROI right out of the gate. It was nuts. This was the fastest, easiest money I'd ever made, and I became a true believer in this idea of that when people, they might be gone today, but they're far from gone forever. Our sales cycles were way shorter. It was much more profitable because it costs hardly anything to reacquire the customers, right? We'd already paid the cost of acquisition.
But the reality is that Winback is about established relationships and simply making sure that you're choreographing your timing to meet their timing, which is really an evergreen skill. The art of selling hot is about making sure that you're always there when the buyer is likely to have a struggling moment. It's predictable, and it's not, I can't remember the last time anyone asked me an original question, gave me an original objection, or asked me for an original piece of information. So all of that can be planned and prepared for. Well, if we actually listen to our customers, they'll also tell us how not to lose them. They'll tell us about adjacent markets, and they'll inform us with all this other information that is this gift that keeps on giving. And instead, we seem to spend most of our time trying to do the hardest work to demonstrate that we can work longer and harder than anybody else at being unproductive. I'm just baffled. That's why you and I teamed up. That's why we've set this entire series up, because it's just baffling to me and to you why anybody would choose to be that ineffective when you don't have to be. I think about someone like Stephen Donohoe, who moved from Australia to London, new market, new company, new product, completely different sector and no network. And in 18 months, he's the #1 salesperson in Clary by selling hot, not cold. It's just insane. So I've deviated. Rob asked, what sort of size company makes 485 grand off a Winback?
Those are small to medium sized businesses, and we define those as companies with 200 employees or less. And actually, in reality, in the study, most of them were like 50 employees or less.
That's interesting. And what about for smaller consultancies? He asked selfishly.
Yeah, what we found is the average was about 70 grand. That's US dollars.
And for an investment of?
Well, for the consultancies, it was basically email and phone outreach. It basically, they basically called it next to nothing. Because it's, we get into this later, but the thing is that the cost of engagement is so low, right? Because they already know you, right? A past customer will engage with 1 to 3 touches. Whereas what is it? How many touches does it take? When you go cold? Not hundreds, dozens, right? Dozens.
Well, Jerry Hill released data in 2018 that it was 33 to 46 cold outreach attempts to get through to a senior decision maker. 32 for normal real businesses and 46 for IT businesses. And then in 2020, it was 6 to 11 follow-up touches for a warm inbound. That's now 18 to 20 for a warm inbound if it's not put straight through to a salesperson. So that's a lot of ripple effect and a lot of extra work that could be avoided. Actually, thinking about it, the most obvious question is it possible to remove the entire cold top of the funnel function and redeploy the resources? We'll talk about that another time, but I want to plant that seed. So let's move on to costs then, because, I mean, on the slide you say a 5K for an SMB. Talk to me what those costs are and how those are comprised.
Yeah, so the study showed for these SMBs that generated 485K, they reported that their hard costs were under 5 grand. And it's cheap for a lot of reasons, right? First of all, your leads are free. They're just sitting in your CRM, right? You don't have to pay salespeople to qualify the prospects or educate them on your product or create relationships. That's the hard part of a sale, right? That's the expensive part, building that relationship, getting people to actually choose you over everyone else. And all that work has already been done. You're like standing 3/4 of the way up the mountain, right? So basically your cost of acquisition has already been paid. You just need to reawaken the relationship, and that cost is extremely low. And compare that to cold. You got to pay for everything, and it's getting more and more expensive. The cost of acquiring a client just keeps going up and up and up. Your expenses keep going up.
With a show of hands, just using the icon at the bottom, tell me something. How many of you have actually tried to win back customers in the last 6 months? You use the icon thing so that we can just get a sense off the screen. One, two, three. Okay, 4. Okay, cool. Again, not unsurprising. And how many of you, again, for those of you who are practicing Winback, are you experiencing close rates north of 20%? Okay, so I think that speaks to another interesting issue, which is whether, if you're practicing Winback, whether you're really practicing Winback or just more activity. So that's a hard one. Let's look at the ROI first of all, because it's important to understand what the upside is, because this isn't about trying to rub salt in the wound. It's trying to find where there is revenue at your fingertips if you choose to unlock it. So
Yeah.
these are big numbers and hefty claims. So you're going to have to defend it, and you're going to have to defend it to the satisfaction of my wife, the CFO.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I've got a big range here, 32x and 182x. And the difference is that the 32x group, that average, that's for campaigns where the cost of re-engaging and winning back is very high. And the 182x, that's the average for win-back campaigns where the cost is really low. So I'll just give you two examples. So one example of a high-cost campaign is this HR agency. And they spent almost $50,000 on their win-back campaign because they had to wine and dine entire HR teams. That's how business was done in their niche. So the campaign generated 1.5 million. So that ROI was 30x. Okay. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, and this is where most companies lie, the cost of win-back is basically is something really inexpensive. It's email outreach or phone outreach, or maybe even $1.50 direct mail pieces. And a good example of this is Ron Contorno. He does win-back campaigns for Major League ball clubs, Texas Rangers, Detroit Tigers, and he gets an ROI between like 173 and 181x. And the reason it's high is because he's just sending out low-cost direct mail pieces, and then people are just taking the orders on inbound. So that's also very typical for any kind of mass market SaaS product, where if you engage and buy and acquire your customers, with something like with email, you can win them back with email. And it's just phenomenal, the ROI, because after you do your first couple of campaigns, you've really zeroed in on exactly what it takes to win them back. And when you understand that, it's you recraft your emails or modify them, and it's just like you can just run the same ones like over and over and over again. You keep doing win-loss analyses afterwards to make sure you're hitting the middle of the target. But oh my God, that's what we ended up doing in one part of my business. We had tens of thousands of people. We just re-upped, not tens of thousands, many thousands. We re-upped straight through, just through email. It was like
there was
easiest.
a really interesting story. Sorry, there was a really interesting story in 2008. The head of marketing for HP's education arm, her budget was slashed from 3 million to 30,000. And they still gave her a 30% increase in target, as they do. And so she came up with a really simple plan. Write to anyone who'd bought something from them in the prior 8 years and offer them something similar but different. And she made her number. Now, more often than not, it takes a little bit of savvy. I was chatting to a chap called Stan, who sells fire detection equipment to places like Texas and California. And there's a power company that's almost bankrupted in North Texas. And he needed to get in touch with the person responsible. And so what he did was he contacted he gave a donation to the Baptist church in Berlin, somewhere in 60 miles north of nowhere. And then a couple of days later phoned up and started a conversation with the admin there and got put through personally to the person responsible. Now, this type of smart thinking is one of the many strategies that you can start piling on top of Winback. Your network, the ecosystem, So these numbers in terms of multipliers, you can start to stack them. That's what makes me most excited about this, because the idea of being able to do twice as much for half the work and get paid twice as much for it. That means that we end up with a massive lifetime value. I mean, when you win back a customer, what's a typical lifetime value compared with a new cold?
It's well, first of all, it's better than a new cold, and I can talk about that in a minute, but lifetime value doubles or more for customers you win back. The customer win back benchmark study found it was about 110, 112%. This is more the second time around. Harvard Business Review found basically the same thing. And in the aggregate, in the thousands of customers that I've won back, I've had the same experience. So it more than doubles for a number of reasons, right? Just think of it. First, they've got to buy your core product again, right? And then they'll buy upsells and cross sells, but they buy them at a much higher rate than a new customer. Client Success did a study, and they found that there's a 65% probability that a mature customer will buy an upsell or cross sell, but only a 13% probability that a new customer will. So it's 5 times the number. And the thing about past customers is when they come back, they don't act like new customers. They act like mature customers, and mature customers buy more than the new customers. But even just wiping all that aside, lifetime value doubles. So you've got this great combination of high win rates, or if you're in SaaS, you call them conversion rates, right? High conversion rates. And when they come back, they generate significant revenue. So this is another reason why I'm just enamored with Winback.
Well, I think one of the really interesting things that might speak to that is that my observation is that people tend to filter when they're making an important decision. They filter first for risk. If it doesn't pass their riskometer or it triggers their risk threshold, then there's no way they're moving forward. And that's how you end up being ghosted, or you're not relevant. Once they've filtered for risk, then they filter for opportunity cost. So if I spend my time, my money, my effort with you, could I spend it better elsewhere? If it passes muster on both of those two, then they look for value. So if you're doing Winback, you're probably already familiar to them. They don't have to jump through all the hoops in terms of compliance, because your anti-slavery policies, your equal opportunities, your diversity policies, your security policies, legal, getting onto the finance system. I mean, that's a huge win. That probably explains why the sales cycles are shorter as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Time kills deals. So if your sales cycle is, a year, and if you can cut it down to 3 months, how many more deals are you going to do? It might be significant. And also, if they know you, like, if you mitigate the risk and you keep the value, like if you're in a very highly competitive market, and you lose a piece of business, well, actually, I'll give you a story. So Greg Briscoe, he was in IT services, and he had this huge customer, La Quinta Hotels. Like, I don't know how many properties. I think it was 1,200 or 1,250, and they lost the contract. They got lured away by a low cost provider. And what Greg did was he had his people keep in contact with the people at La Quinta, and the people who won the business away, they have 200 competitors in that market. Huge, super competitive market, because these contracts are worth so much. Anyway, Greg lost the business. He kept in contact, and that new vendor, they dropped the ball. So Greg was right there supporting them, nurturing them the whole way along. He even helped offboard. He was really good at maintaining the relationships. And they had all these contacts in the company, and he told all of his salespeople to keep in contact. Anyway, when La Quinta was unhappy with that new vendor, they didn't go out to those, that job didn't go out to the other 200 vendors anymore. They already vetted all that stuff. They didn't have time for any of that. They went right back to Greg because they knew Greg could deliver. And so that mitigated the risk. They knew that they now knew that he was delivering good value. So he was able to win something back in a very highly competitive market. I've got a lot of stories like that.
Let's talk about prospecting, because the insanity of it all, and for those of you who still harbor belief that going cold makes sense, a 3% click-through and 15% conversion rate, if you do the maths, that's 0.03 times 0.15, which is 0.0045%. Dan, what is the purpose of prospecting?
The purpose of prospecting is to generate a paying customer.
So if you have a 0.0045% success rate at generating customers, would you consider that to be a winning strategy?
Not so much.
Okay. Now, what happens to the leads that aren't converted? They get handed on to the SDR team, who now has to follow up, let's pretend conservatively 6 to 11 times. That's an awful lot of touches that didn't need to happen if you didn't attract the wrong type of buyer into the top of the pipeline. So why is it we spend so much time trying to attract people from the total addressable market instead of just ideal customers who are or will be motivated to buy?
Why do we do it? I think that's the way things have always been done. And this is how we became successful, by acquiring new customers, working on retaining them and expanding. And that's it. That's our playbook. I think it's cultural, right? It's always been done that way. And that's how we're going to continue to do it.
Okay. So when I look at the amount of dead time, and again, for those of you on the call, please, in the chat, in terms of cold outbound, how much of your life is taken up with prospecting or following up on prospecting cold leads? Just give us a percentage, rough percentage, please. Okay, so Rob, Nancy, you're selling hot. 70 to 75 to 90.
Learn from the best.
Depressing lot of time. Yeah, got it. 40%. And the worrying part as well. Okay. 50-50. Okay, so we're talking anywhere between 40 and 90%, except if you're at the elevated end, that's marked as 10%. And again, I'm not saying don't go cold, but get it right first. That if you can precisely target, and one of the things we'll be talking about in the next webinar is how you can use technology to help you dig into the small data to identify just the right people and how to communicate with them. One of the things that we'll bring in the third webinar is another piece of technology, which is AI that thinks like a human being. I mean, imagine being able to adapt and modify your communication on the basis of localization down to the level of masculinity in Saudi Arabia and how much they like to control things. And probably the weather isn't a good example there because I'm guessing it's hot. But down to things like the weather. So you can precisely time your messaging to exactly your customers and only attract the right ones at the right time. That is available to us today. So if any of you are harboring doubts that you should still be going cold, get rid of them for a while and just imagine for a moment that you could generate 3 times faster sales. What would you do with the additional time? Dan, when you practiced your win-back campaign in your business, how much more time did you end up being able to spend in front of customers, developing relationships internally, creating processes and systems that made your life easier?
It freed up a ton of time. And what we did is we simply doubled down on what was working for us best at the time, and that was creating partnerships. So it was a massive boom. Our regular sales cycle was, we had to source leads, we had to contact, we had to qualify them, we had to educate them, we had to do all these things, right? And that took a ton of time. But with the win-back, so much of the sales work was already done, right? So our sales cycles were considerably shorter, and we wanted to keep optimizing. And so we basically stopped trying to create relationships, one-on-one, and we just went full out partnership. Anyway, so that was one of the big benefits. We could just go full out partnership.
Well, the roadmap that we're laying the groundwork for here today is a pathway to 4 months to have 200% more qualified prospects, motivated buyers in your ideal customer profile within 120 days and cash coming into the bank, and to create pipeline and revenue certainty by taking what you learn and then amping it up by applying the principles of the channel and focusing on executing as efficiently as possible, because that number on the screen allows you to manage this one metric, which no one else is really paying any attention to. And that is the value contributed per seller hour. Imagine being able to triple that for every single person in your sales operation. So Dan, how do you release that?
We generate that revenue. We make these sales faster. I mean, here's the thing: win-back isn't only faster, right? It's easier too, right? It's easier because the prospects are familiar with you. What you just talked about, risk, right? It's a lot less risky to deal with somebody who you know versus somebody unproven or an unknown quantity, right? And that familiarity has benefits through the entire sales cycle, right? At the very beginning, as I mentioned earlier, it's so much easier to engage a past customer than a new one, right? It only takes 1 to 3 touches. And then, it just goes all through the cycle. You've already got the relationship. So instead of building a relationship, you're just reawakening a relationship. And then, when it comes to the close, you've already been through the whole closing process, once before, right? You've already generated a contract or an SOW. You've gone through other security protocols. So closing is also faster and also easier because you've already done all that, that heavy lifting. And, when you're trying to win somebody back, you've already got insider knowledge, right? You've already, you've already done business before, right? So you know how they buy, they've used your products, you've got usage data. If you've done work with their teams, how they work and what's important to them. So you got this tremendous amount of knowledge that you can use to create relevant messaging and offers, which you don't have.
Tell me about the ink case, because that's really relevant to what you were just saying. And I think a lot of people on the call will be able to make the intellectual leap in terms of the ongoing payoff and the ripple effect. So talk about Ink Magazine.
Yeah, so Ink Magazine, they did a win-back, and what they did after the win-back is they did a win-loss analysis, and they wanted to find out who was buying, why they were buying, who wasn't buying, and why they weren't buying. And what they found was that the people who bought, who came back, they wanted longer articles with like 5 or more takeaways that they figured out for themselves. That was the common thread. And for the people who didn't come back, they wanted shorter articles. They wanted one takeaway, and they wanted to be told what that takeaway was. So this did two really big things for Inc. It allowed them to more clearly define their ideal customer. They use that in their sales and marketing. And it also showed them this adjacent market of people who wanted shorter articles, the ones who didn't come back, and now they could create that product, right? So it was a huge eye opener, and that was
Right.
that was
Okay, so again, just having a logical chain of thought here. If we look at the ripple effect of doing the Winback study, you understand how to get customers back. You understand about product innovation. You understand about unmet need, adjacent markets, and unidentified demand, which presumably there is little or no competition. So have you got examples of where people have used that? I mean, Netflix did to a large extent, didn't they?
Yeah. There's so much you learn when you talk to your past customers. You might find that they left you because there's something wrong. Your product didn't have some kind of functionality. And there's a gentleman, and he was in a business adjacent to the oil market. And when he went back to find out why they were gone, their product couldn't deliver what they wanted, but nobody's product could. But what they did is, because his product already delivered so much of what they needed, he worked with them to co-create a new product. And then when they co-created that new product, it was exactly what that market needed. And he was able to get into the actual oil part of the market, which was the really lucrative part, which nobody else had been able to break into because nobody had that inside knowledge, that co-creative power.
Well, that's interesting, because that then speaks to the trust issue, doesn't it?
100%. I mean, they already know you. They know that you do what you say. They know that you do good work. So they're willing to spend time, or some of them are willing to spend time creating that product, because they think you're the best person to do it because of what they know about you.
So again, what are the biggest challenges that you guys are facing in terms of filling your pipeline up? Because this does offer instant pipeline. I mean, literally, within the first 30 days, you should be able to start reaching out to prospects. Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%. And you're not just filling your pipeline with anything. You're filling your pipeline with sales qualified leads. And I say they're sales qualified because they've bought from you before. So they had a need from the past. And if they had that, and they probably still have that need or have it again in the future, right? They chose you all above your competition. So at one point in time, there was something special about you, your product, or your messaging. So, these are, like I said, they're sales qualified leads, and you can filter out the ones that weren't a good fit. You can filter out the ones that were a pain in the butt. You can filter out all the lesser leads because you've already engaged them. You don't know any of this stuff with new prospects, so you can really cherry pick and put some really a large number of high quality leads into your pipeline.
So major problem, certainly within SaaS, but I'm seeing it across the board in many industries, is churn. Presumably, if you're speaking to customers who left, you can find out why they left and then identify the customers in your existing customer base who are likely to leave and at risk, and therefore stop it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, churn is a silent killer. The average business loses half their customer base in 3 to 6 years. And Winback helps reduce churn because one of the core functions of Winback is to find out why people are leaving and then to actually plug those holes, right? So when you do a Winback campaign, you talk directly to lost customers. You don't guess why they left. you know, and then you find out why they want to come back, and then you go and you launch a campaign, and you find out was that the truth, right? And let's just say that it was truth adjacent. You know, you had to do a little bit more to win them back, or they didn't tell you all the churn reasons. So after you do your campaign, you do this win-loss analysis, and you ask them, you know, why did you buy? You know, why didn't you buy? And so you get this much deeper perspective on why people churn. And then you see the people who came back, and you ask them why they came back, and you knew this is how we plug that hole. So none of this is theoretical. So you're really, really digging deep into actual things that work for improving churn.
And that actually speaks to why the retention and the lifetime value are higher. Because if you listen to somebody, they're going to feel heard. And all human beings want to be heard, feel felt, and be understood. And our number one driver as human beings is to look for what feels familiar, whilst at the same time seeking novelty.
Yeah.
That's how messed up we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to underline one thing before you, Marcus. Like this can be a really big deal. I've seen churn get just knocked right down. Tom Williams and his EVP of sales at one business, they increased retention by 14%. They took it up from 83% to 97%. And, you know, Tom's a brilliant guy, but what made this work is they found that reason why people were churning. And, you know, it's not like they'd never tried to fix their churn problems before. He just approached it from a different angle. And not only, and this is fascinating too, Tom didn't only increase retention by 14%, but he won back 90% of his lost customers because there was this one thing that they were doing wrong, and he found it. So anyway, yeah.
Well, but again, remember that compounds every single quarter, every year. I mean, that stuff doesn't just go away. It's not a one-off like a transactional sale. And herein lies a major difference, which is that you're focusing on trying to prospect for customers for life. What you're not trying to do is find someone to fill a meeting quota. Yep. It feels very different when you're on the receiving end, doesn't it?
100%. And when you feel that way, when you feel better about that, how much more likely are you to become an advocate or to refer?
Okay, so let's, we're coming close to time, and I want to make sure that there's time for people to ask questions as well. So random acts of outreach are not Winback. So what are we doing when we are doing, because when I asked, you know, who's got north of 20%, no one put their hand up. So there must be room for improvement. What are the typical mistakes people make when they're doing Winback, and what's the number one?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is they guess at why people have left and why they'll come back. And this is very common. A lot of very smart people do this, and because they think that they've got a really solid grasp on what their why customers are churning. Anyway, I know we're short for time, so just make this fast. We don't know what people are thinking. That's the bottom line. You know, there's been so many studies. One of them was from a professor out of the University of Chicago, and he found that people that we kind of know, we're only right about what they're thinking or feeling 20% of the time. And for people that were really close to us, like our family members or our spouses, we're only right 30% of the time. So you can't guess. You literally, yeah, and you can't talk to current customers. They don't know why people leave. They're just guessing too. You've got to talk to people who've actually left, and you've got to actually win them back. So you've got to solve for both sides of that equation, and that's what Winback does. That's what the process does. It solves for both sides.
So I mean, the framework's pretty self-explanatory, but just walk us through what the identify and understand part are. The execution of Winback we'll save for another time.
Sure. So say you've got 1,000 or 100 past customers. Well, which ones do you want to go after first? So what we do is we've got a formula for ranking past customers. We assign each of them a number, and it's based on things like what was their previous lifetime value. That's a great indicator of future value. We take a look at recency. We take a look at frequency. We take a look at behavioral clues. Did they refer? Did they complain and have that complaint rectified? So there's all these. We take all kinds of data that you've got, like whatever data you've got, and we create a win-back potential number. So that's the first thing we do. We identify the customers with the best potential, and then the second step is we want to get a deep understanding of why they left, what it'll take to win them back, so there's no guessing. And we do that with a trio of surveys: an internal, external, qualitative, and external quantitative. So we want to find out the internal one gives us context. The external quantitative, we find what the big rocks are, and then the qualitative, it tells us which one of those rocks is biggest, what's the biggest reason for them to churn, what's the biggest reason for the comeback, so we know the number one thing to hit first. And that's what we do in our first campaign. Because those insights, they'll tell us what kind of messaging we need to offer. They'll tell what kind of an offer we need to make and how we need to wrap it. That's the 15-second super fast version.
Okay. Well, again, helpful. There's a win-back calculator that Dan provides. Go to it and work out your own data. Just put it in there. You're not going to be charged anything, but try and work out where the sweet spot is for you, because there is a monumental upside, and you're walking past this stuff every day. This is within your reach and within your grasp. None of this stuff, none of this business is out of your reach. You may come across some internal resistance, and if you are facing internal resistance, go via the customer success recordings first. That's where you're going to get the best information. But Dan, let's go back a couple. Let's just do a quick recap for everyone, please.
Sure. So the big thing is Winback generates a lot of revenue, and it's low cost, and it's fast revenue. So it's like, this is like my cadence was, Wednesday and Thursday mornings for 2 hours, our salespeople focused on Winback. First we created a process to win people back. We had this cadence for them.
What was the typical effectiveness rate of your salespeople? So for every 10 outbound attempts, how many would they typically get a response from?
They probably get a response from 4 to 6. It depends on the customer grouping that we're looking at, and that's the first time run. By the time you hit 3, pretty well 85% response rate.
Well, your third sprint.
Yep. Well, wow. Yeah, and the thing is that now this is it was different across different cohorts, but I'm just trying to give you like an overview, right? We would hit them. We would do like one campaign, and then we would wait, say 6 months to do another campaign. And in that 6 months, the people might not have been ready the first time around, but they were ready the second time around, right? It's that whole middle of the funnel thing. People aren't going to buy until they're ready, right? And so we do multiple campaigns. And we also learned a lot of other things, like we learned how to offboard people. So when we lost somebody, we knew how to offboard them. So the salespeople were all doing really good offboarding, so we had a much higher chance of winning them back later on, right? We also, anyway, so you get the idea. That they weren't just simply doing win-back. They were setting up the next win-back. They were doing nurturing because, they knew when the buying window opened, right? So we wanted to make sure we were there months before that buying window opened. So there's a lot of things that they were doing. It wasn't simply winning them back.
Very smart. Okay. Any questions from the room?
What I would say is, if you're not doing win-back, why not? It works. It's a no-brainer. Really.
What's your experience, Carl?
I've got several stories. I won't share them all, but I can say that the Winback that I have done in my early career in sales, I got 100% result every time at zero cost. I was a rookie. I was actually a food buyer, and I wanted to have a little go at sales because I saw they were the guys driving the RS2 escorts and stuff like that, and I had to take the train to work. So I begged to have some clients that I could try. My boss gave me permission, absent without leave, if you like, from the buying side. And I was given half a dozen old accounts by the sales director. He said, "Oh, Gordon, you can't do any damage with these. We haven't talked to them for years." So I went off and, I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I made some appointments. And the very first one that I arrived at, big food distributor in the UK. And, I spoke to them. I said, I know we haven't been in touch for several years. What happened? Cut a long story short, our company had let the side down. They hadn't done what they should have done on sales side. So I just by talking to them, gaining their trust, listening to what they had to say, because they had an axe to grind because they were upset. But then going forward with that and then getting an order from them, because I was the buyer of this product. It was actually canned tomatoes. And we used to buy them from the container, by the container load from Italy. I do all the buying and the shipping costs and everything. So I knew every single penny that we made on every single tin. So I was able to come up with a deal with them. I sold them 20 containers of tomatoes. Each container is like a 20-foot container with, I think, 2,500 cases of tomatoes in it, with 24 tins in each case. So you can work it out. Now, a good salesman, an average sale would be 3 containers. A very good sale would be twice that, 6. And there's rookie Carl, who's actually a buyer, but an imposter salesperson, going in to this company and doing a deal with them. I came back, I was jumping for joy when I went out of there. The next day I went into the office, presented this to the business. The CEO, chairman, it was like an old-fashioned company in those days. He sat in this glass room, and he called me in with the sales director and some other people in the sales team, and he wiped the floor with us. I got a dressing down. The sales director nearly lost his job because he said there is no way Carl should have been able to go in and do that. He's not a salesperson, and it just shouldn't have happened. So what went wrong? Of course, I didn't get the job as a salesperson, but I went on and I actually made sales with the other 5 dead customers that I'd been given.
So you've now made a really important point, which is I believe that selling hot, and Winback in particular, is a catalyst for procurement to become the hero.
Yes. Yeah. Because if you know the numbers, you know your product, you know your costs, you can actually then come up with the best deal for them and for you as the business. You're not making any losses and you're making a good profit.
And finance too, because the top of the funnel must cause the CFO to have palpitations. The amount of money spent on marketing, data, technology, people, governance, recruitment, HR, all that gubbins, that's massive. And none of it's necessary.
And Ford RS escorts cost a lot of money in those days. So all of those things, add up. But, I think we're too, and even sort of recently, I've been working with an e-com business. I won't share who that is, but they are absolutely 100% focused on acquisition. And I'm saying, well, hang on, I've just seen Dan's picture there, the leaky bucket. Yeah. And I'm saying, what about all these customers that you're hemorrhaging out the back door? Oh, we're not interested in those. I said, well, someone should. I felt so passionate about it. I thought, if I could set up an e-com business just like theirs, I would call those customers and win the whole lot back for me, because that's something that we should consider. When customers are arrogant about the customer, when businesses are arrogant about the customers they're losing, someone should be able to say, well, we're going to win those back as a business, as a win-back business. Yeah.
That's exactly what disruption is, isn't it? It's people spotting the opportunity that other people miss. The reason I love Winback and the customer interview is you've got an opportunity to go and find out what you missed, how you're wrong. Amy, you've got your hand raised. Fire away. Ask Dan a question so I get out of trouble with Suzanne.
The bit I was interested in is around the kind of the quote unquote kind of surveying of both internal teams and clients. So I think we missed that quite a lot, and that was a really missing piece in this, which was actually how do you do that, and is it that you would like reach out with some survey questions to the client to find out, kind of get a broad brush view of that? Is that what you were saying, Dan, when you were talking about survey?
Yeah, so the goal is to find out why people left and what it'll take to win them back, right?
Yeah.
So before you reach out, you want to kind of like show them that you know them, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you don't say something silly, right? So you want to talk to your internal team and you want to ask them, why do you think people have left? What do you think it'll take to win them back? I've got a series of questions I can share with you if you'd like. Just text, let me know. But the thing is, so first you get that context.
Yeah.
You just want to make this as relevant as possible. You got lower value customers, like are they like, say their ACV annual contract value is at like north of like 50,000, south of 1,000? Just give me some examples.
North of 50,000. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So they're very valuable.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is you want to talk to the customer success people, anybody who's customer facing for each of those customers. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to understand, was there any special buying criteria they had? Was there any special problem they had? You want to take a look at anything that is really relevant to them. Does that make sense? Like you want to dig deep. This isn't something you do generically now.
Yeah.
And then you want to reach out. So you get all that background, and then you reach out to them individually and ask, and the ask is for, we'd like to learn, we want to do better, things went sideways, and could we get some feedback? You need a good reason to reach out.
That's the thing. Yeah. Okay.
And I can help you with stories for that, because that's also another thing. But the bottom line is that, so you don't need to worry about the qualitative and the quantitative, right?
Okay.
All you've got is quantitative, because every one of those customers is worth investing a few hours to understand why they're going.
Yeah.
And you actually can start off with an email to try to get people back. Brian Matamore, he's one of the top ideation people in the States, and he just sent out an email to all of his customers, like our clients, and he charges serious money. And he just said, listen, you bought this before. I'm thinking about offering this. Can we talk and see, get your opinion? That his story was getting the feedback. So there's many different ways of doing this. And I would go and talk to Carl. He's pretty brilliant. He knows he could figure this out in minutes.
Well, one of the things we built into the selling aptitude test deliberately was executive engagement. And that's something that people fail to do. And this is a great opportunity to engage your senior executives, to actually go and talk to senior executives in past customers, and let them have their arse whipped. Go in with some humility and listen. Almost nothing beats being heard. Human beings want to be heard. And if you listen deeply, miraculously, and then you actually act on it, instead of sending out these surveys and then doing nothing with it, or taking 18 months to do a half-assed attempt, you come back with something absolutely precise and rock solid. I'll come back to your comment in a second, Carl. Rob had his hand raised. Rob. Carl.
Yeah, so I'm a huge advocate for reacquiring clients. Though with my clients, they struggle with this, where I give them advice to do this and how to do it, but they often fear reaching out to clients to see if they're at risk, because they don't want to kick the sleeping dog, which is just the worst thing you could possibly do. And then in other cases where it's to reapproach them, where they're afraid to reapproach them, they don't know what to say. I'm saying you must add value. Give them a reason to talk to you. Try to help them with something, not even just saying, hey, how's it going, but giving them a reason to want to speak to you. How do you help push people into actually taking action on this? Because I have difficulty motivating them to do it.
The reason that people tend not to do Winback, the reason that they're not motivated, there's a few reasons. One is they don't know the numbers. If they knew that their sales cycles are going to be way shorter, and you can articulate that. If you can,
I
show
do
them
articulate that part of it. Yes.
okay, so maybe it's something like Carl had, like this was the way that business is done here, and we don't do things differently, so we're not interested. Our minds are closed off to it. Is it something like that?
Yeah, I think it's more of like a psychological barrier, like an actual fear, where they're deliberately not taking action because they're afraid of what the response might be, or that maybe they have anxiety pent up around reapproaching someone who
Sure.
like once denied or invalidated them.
If they have extreme reticence to do this, you can hire an outside firm to go and do the initial outreach and find the people who are really angry, But I always recommend having somebody within the company who's reaching out as a learning call. That way, if somebody's upset, now they've got somebody to talk to. They're not going to chew the ear off the person who didn't do that bad thing. You approach them like, we're here to do better. We didn't do well the first time around. What happened, and maybe how can we make it better? People.
Right, and what about the apathy of what they have apathy toward? So that side, yes, but the apathy towards reaching out to a client where they left on good terms. They're afraid also to reach out to people where they parted ways as friends. They provided a good service. There was nothing wrong with it, and everybody was happy in the end of it. But going back to them saying, "Hey, do you want to buy this again?" There's also apathy toward that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I don't know why.
You can do the same thing, but it doesn't have to be wrapped up in a sales call. It can be, how are things going with your new vendor? What's changed in your business?
So should I actually give them a script for it? Because I give them advice on how to approach what to talk about, but
Rob,
maybe
we're going to be
giving them
covering a
their
lot of this
direction.
in the next webinar. So this time next week, we're going to be covering off a lot about how you create alliances and you engage other people to give discretionary effort willingly, because it's all about creating empowerment with other people. It doesn't matter whether it's internal or external. And as I said in the chat to Carl, the hardest sale is often the internal one. The majority of my clients come to me having beaten their head against the wall, already successful, and just frustrated that they're not able to get it to go beyond that initial win for themselves because there's resistance. Well, that's a matter of choreography and recognizing and taking on one of the most important messages from next session, which is move your time frame. Your time frame needs to move from the short term, the 0 to 6 month time scale, which is basically shark infested waters, to 6 to 36 months before your prospects, your future customers, will be in active looking phase. In the meantime, you carry on as you are so that you keep your shareholders happy. But what you do is you take Winback through customer success, and you start with the customer success recordings, because you've got thousands of hours of recordings. And CS speak to customers for 6 to 8 hours a day about real stuff. And sales people speak to them for about 3 minutes a day. So listen to that, then have interviews with the CS people and listen to the small data. Read Martin Lindstrom's book, Small Data. Everyone focuses on the big data. It's the throwaway comment. It's that little niggling doubt. And if you have the CS recordings, record audio montages of your customers saying what a great job you're doing and also what a miserable job you're doing, and then play that to your board. I promise that will wake them up.
Oh yeah, well,
I'll just add one more thing to that.
Yep.
Sometimes the board, they just need proof, right? So run a pilot.
Yeah.
Based on the numbers, this is what the numbers are in the aggregate or on average. What are the numbers for my business? Do a small test. Nothing will prove up an idea faster than a small test.
Bless you.
On your own customer base. You
guys saw the numbers of how much it cost, around 5K, whatever. Okay. If you were to ask for 10% of the bottom 20% performing budget, whatever it is, whether it's advertising or cold calling, you just ask for 10% of that budget, so 2% of the total budget, to pilot Winback, because that's probably enough for you to do a pretty damn good job and prove the hypothesis. And you could run 2 or 3 reasonable tests with that sort of budget, couldn't you, Dan?
Easy.
Right. Then you take what you've learned there and you take it into the channel. And that's the stuff we're going to be talking about next week as well, because this is how you start creating multipliers. The syntax is ask, what is the job to be done? Then, what's not working? Let's stop doing that. Duh. Okay. Then let's work out how to make it work. So unless it's generating at least an 80% success rate, we keep working at it. And even then we keep iterating, but the minimum baseline is 4 out of 5 times it delivers the outcome we intended, not 0.0045%. Okay. And once we've worked out what's working, then we multiply, then we scale. We don't scale ineffective. We only scale effective stuff. And we test and we test and we test and we iterate. That's this whole process. And that's the journey you've just begun. So we're going to be going really hard on selling hot. Okay, I'm introducing the new methodology that Suzanne and I have developed called the Ally Method. It's all about removing perceived risk in your brain, in your buyer's brain, and in the manager's brain. Because if you don't have psychological safety, you get in the way. And you show up with the intent that you intend to sell. And no one wants to be sold. They love to buy, they hate to be sold. So what we're doing is introducing that. You'll see how it fits in with Winback, with channel sales, and there's a choreographed process so that over 12 to 18 months, depending on how timid you feel, you can move from 100% cold to 100% hot with your baseline close rates in the 20% mark, going up to 85, 95%. Third of the sales cycle length. All of this stuff is being proven. People out there today that were on this call are doing it. Okay, so that's what's on offer. If you want to have a coaching session and a one-off session with either Dan or myself, DM us. And if you could tell other people, we'd be very grateful. Okay, so that's the promise. If you've got questions about Winback, if you've got questions about selling hot, then just get in touch. You know, we're absolutely here to help. We're trying to create a better future for all salespeople, and more importantly, for customers. They deserve better. I fundamentally believe that it's up to us. And the 3 things you're going to learn about next week are about self-mastery, relationship mastery, and performance mastery. So those are the 3 teaching takeaways that you're going to walk away with, and how to implement them immediately. Thank you. Okay, any parting comments, any parting questions?
Thank you, it was great.
My pleasure.
It's always great to be involved in a conversation about Winback. Love it.
Well, you're so good at it.
No, it's lovely just listening to you two. So thank you both.
Well, it's just so
And
exciting.
Suzanne.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. This has been a lot of fun. Yeah, please tell other people when the video's out, please share it. And if you can promote the next one, be very grateful. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care. Bye.
Cheers.